Now, while that's drying, I'm going to go back to, because these colors need more saturation, I'm going to go back to the lemon yellow, wipe the brush off so I get a point, and I'm going to put another layer of lemon yellow in that space. And I'm probably going to have to put 3 layers. So every time you do this, paint carefully. And I'll do my ultramarine again because that's nice and dry at this point. I'll put another layer of ultramarine down. And as you can see, we have not touched the tint areas, and we have not touched the shade areas. All right, we got a little puddle here. Dry off the brush and pick it up. Capillary action is your friend. The red orange is dry enough that I can go back into my Scarlet Lake and add another layer of Scarlet Lake. These center colors should be pretty well saturated so that you get a true sense of what that pigment looks like. So now these 2 colors are dry enough that now we can do our orange, our true orange. And again, we'll put some color down. Move it so you don't have a lake of color. And you can see this one is definitely going to need several more layers in order to come up to the same saturation as the colors next to it. That's why I say make sure you mix enough color so that you don't run into problems with running out. Just watch the surface of the paper to make sure that you're not going into an area that's already starting to dry. All right, so now our second set of colors will be the greens. And as you can see, I have painted in the Prussian blue. I think it still could have another layer of color, which I will add later. But I've mixed 3 greens. This is the blue-green, the green, and the yellow-green. So I'm going to start with the yellow-green because that area is dry. And I will load my brush with pigment and then paint in this area. And this is probably just about the right shade that we need. So I probably will not have to go over this again. But you can see how wet it is. So I'm going to dry this brush off a little bit and pull some of that moisture out of that upper area while it's still wet. And then finish off the shape. It's very important when you mix these greens that you use the lemon yellow and the Prussian blue. Do not use the ultramarine because then you will have introduced the third primary and you will get a green that is a little bit neutralized. And we'll talk about that when we do the shades on this color wheel. Okay, now let's see, is this dry enough? Yes. Okay, so now I will do the blue-green, and this might be a little thinner, so this might have to have, yes, this will have to have several layers of color to bring it up to the saturation that it needs to be. Why did this happen? Well, because of the way I mixed the color. But what was more important to me was to get the right hue so that it looked correct in position on the color wheel. And I did test all of these colors before I decided that these were the proper mixes. Dry the brush off and lift any extra color that seems to be floating about. Very delicately. Alright, so we'll wait on that to do anything more, and then we will do the center green, or what is the true green. Now in your kit you also have sap green, which I'm not having to use for this color wheel, but you can add it. And you can do that by taking a little circle template or taking a dime, something that has a little circle shape to it, and on the inside of your color wheel under your green you can draw a little circle, lighten it up, and take your sap green, which you have in your palette, and you can fill that with sap green. You can see what a nice green this is. You'll notice I still have a puddle even in this little tiny shape. And as I move it towards the final edge, I will pick it up wherever there's too much concentration. So we get a nice flat green. And then you can label this sap green all right, these are done. So let's take the mixed green that we made and let's test it. And we're going to fill this shape. Look at how close that is to sap green. So sometimes you don't need what you think you need. While it's wet, you have some opportunity to control it. Dry off the brush. And then finish off the shape. Now if you want to, you can add another layer of green in here, but save these because you're going to need it for the tints and the shades. Alright, so this guy looks pretty good. We don't have to do anything to him. He's a really good color. So we're going to add a little bit more lemon yellow to this shape here to bring it up closer to where we want it to be. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the violets in here. We also have Winsor violet in our kit, so I'm going to make a little circle like I did with the sap green, and I'm going to paint in the Winsor violet. But we're going to mix our violet from our permanent rose and from our ultramarine blue. As you can see at this point, I have filled in the entire color wheel for its full saturated colors. I have had to do several layers of some of these colors, the purples or the violets, just to build them up and so that they have a close relationship to the primary colors that we initially put on the color wheel. I also added a little circle for Winsor violet, and what's interesting here is that this Winsor violet very closely matches the mix that I made using ultramarine and permanent rose. The important thing to remember when you are doing these three colors, the secondary and the two tertiaries, is that they are made with ultramarine, and ultramarine tends to settle. So you're better off doing multiple layers in order to build up the saturation that you need for these colors. And make sure that you mix the color every time you go into it to paint, because again that ultramarine will settle to the bottom of the mix, and if you just dip it chances are you have a different balance between the permanent rose and the ultramarine. So make sure that as you do this, you always stir up that mix before you start to use it. And this, you would do this for any time that you have a combination of ultramarine and something else. Regardless of what you're painting, you always want to make sure you mix that in order to get the molecules to be nicely blended into the liquid combination.